Friday morning. It's another time to do another Chip Talks, which is always fun. This one's going to be good. It's going to be on endometriosis. This is a real suffer in silence kind of disease. So, if you're a woman out there who has this disease, you've probably been marginalized. You've probably been preached to by your doctor, about how it's related to sex or, cleanliness or whatever. That is absolutely none of that crap is right. So I'll tell you that right now. And as we get into this, I think you're going to see that endometriosis is it's a cancer. It's absolutely a cancer. It looks and behaves just like a cancer. And it's treatable, like cancers are. So your body, has lots of defenses to defend yourself against cancer. We just need to understand how our bodies work and then sort of activate all these processes. And some of these processes are activated by behavior and diet, and some of them are activated by supplements, and some of them are activated by other things. The sun would be one. Anyway, it's a good day to be alive here in Oklahoma. I'm very proud of my fellow Oklahomans this week. So we did some cool stuff. We demonstrated that we are awake, spiritually awake, and that we're gonna continue on our health journey here. That's the way that I read things, at least. I don't know how you guys read things, but that's the way I read it. So that's a good thing, and that's a good thing in the change the world category, let's just say. And in my mind, that's what we're doing. I mean, we're changing the world. Here at what we do, we're very close to, at least in theory, figuring out how disease works. Okay. So we're on it. I mean, we are on it, and we're getting ready to prove that in a very, very big way, which is very exciting to me. But anyway, it's been a good week. So here we go. Let's talk about endometriosis because this is a big deal. So again, these are sponsored by Treat the Cause. So Treat the Cause is a new thing that we'll be talking about soon. Treat the Cause is affiliated with a couple of nonprofits, one of which is FICO Playbook. FICO Playbook is working here in Oklahoma right now through something called Operation Zero 2.0. So if you have cancer, if you have endometriosis and you're here in Oklahoma, there's a lady named Jamie Bennett that you'll need to get a hold of, and Jamie will get you in the program. Or you can just go to ficoplaybook.org, I believe, and sign up. So, or you can contact me and I'll get you signed up. Any of those will work. But if you are out there with a cancer or love someone with a cancer situation, these are really, really good resources. And again, they're going to have this same information that I'm going to give you today. We do this in all manner of cancers, and we view cancer in this way. And what I mean by that is every cell inside of you is always trying to get better. God is a perfect engineer. He made you always striving to be perfect, always striving to get better. And we know this because every cell inside of us will divide and create a new perfect self. And we've got a mechanism, as long as it's activated, to clean up the bad cells, okay? So, but everything in us is always going this way. Now, why, health-wise, are we going the other way? Well, there's a reason for that, and that is literally the cause of disease, and it's, bacterial infection. It's, and you can call it bacteria, virus, fungus, but it's, kind of all of the above, and these guys just cycle through little life cycles. But depending on your immune system, which, depends on your health, if you have a very weak immune system, these guys are going to take hold, and you're going to have a pathogenic result. And even as you increase the strength of your immune system, they may have such a hold that you can't break their little loop. So we're going to be talking a lot about that. We're going to have some loop breakers, let's say, and certainly if you're a cannabis person, THC is a loop breaker, CBD is a loop breaker, but we'll talk a lot about that. Okay, so let's get into why we're here today. We're going to talk about endometriosis in detail. So what is endometriosis? Well, endometriosis is often a painful disorder. The tissue that normally lines the inside of your uterus, the endometrium, grows outside your uterus. So basically the stem cells, the mesenchymic stem cells that are associated with building the lining of your uterus kind of get outside the uterus and get out of control. This involves the ovaries, fallopian tubes, and tissues lining your pelvis. Rarely, endometrial-like tissue may be found beyond the area where pelvic organs are located. So again, this can get out of your uterine cavity, let's say, and get into other places in your body, and that can and does happen. The endometrial-like tissue acts as endometrial tissue would. It thickens, breakdowns, and bleeds with each menstrual cycle. I did not know this. So again, if you have endometriosis and it's outside of your uterine cavity, you're still going to cycle with that endometriosis, and that endometriosis is going to cycle with you. Because again, these come from the stem cells that build your female parts that cycle. So I found that really interesting. I didn't know that. But again, these little dysregulated guys, these bacterially infected, because that's what they are, guys, are going to cycle with you, which means that they will cycle in their disease state or their pathology, their kind of life cycle. They're going to do that with you. So things are going to get worse at certain times and better at certain times. There's no way for this tissue to exit your body, so you don't have a way in your uterine cavity to you have an immune system, but outside of your uterine cavity, it's sort of just space, and you really don't have a way to get rid of that other than your lymphatic. So it gets trapped in there. When endometriosis involves the ovaries, cysts called endometriomas may form. Surrounding tissue can become irritated, eventually developing scar tissue and adhesions, bands of fibrous tissue that can cause pelvic tissues and organs to stick to each other. So things can become fused, including organs, with endometriosis. So again, if you have this outside of your uterine cavity, it gets very, very dangerous because you can fuse your organs together, and obviously that's not a good thing. Endometriosis can cause pain, sometimes severe, especially during menstrual periods. Fertility problems may also develop. So that's pretty obvious, I think, because there's a big dysregulation in the sort of female reproductive. All right, so pathology, if you don't know what pathology means, it's sort of the how does a disease work, or how do these bacteria work? When they get inside of you, and how does this whole run, right? Soup to nuts. So it absolutely is a bacterial hijack. If you want to prove this to yourself, you can. I mean, there's a lot of ways to do this, but just take my word for it. No, don't do that ever again. Always prove things to yourself. Don't take anybody's word for anything. But look down there and you'll see an article, an NIH article, that I basically pulled this information from this study that link is referencing. So this was a study, I think, University of San Diego, but with their women's health program, and they looked at endometriosis. What they found was everybody had E. coli. Everybody had E. coli in their menstrual blood. So it's pretty likely that this is associated with E. coli. But it could be associated with any bacteria that produces LPS, and we'll talk about that in a second. But you can see endotoxin LPS in menstrual blood, endotoxin LPS in peritoneal fluid, and then you can see LPS TLR4 growth and progression of endometriosis. So this is a bacterial hijack, just like cancer and autism and a lot of the other diseases I've studied. This is what happens. So this little bacterial hijack, and a lot of these hijacks are with LPS. The cancer's not necessarily with LPS, but some cancers are with LPS. Certainly this one is. So bacteria must set up a little fort, right? So they've got to, just think about, bacteria is just like us. I mean, they want to stay alive, so they need to defend themselves. They want to eat and they want to reproduce. So in order to do that, they kind of have to set up a little home or a little fort and, take hold and then reproduce from there and kind of do their dirty work from there. So all of them have to set up a little fort in order to survive, eat, and reproduce. According to the study, the main pathogenic bacteria is E. coli, but it could be others. So again, if you've been tested, if you have endometriosis and you've been tested, maybe you tested for something other than E. coli, that doesn't mean that that's not part of the pathology. So it's these little guys can change shape. If I hit E. coli with a antibiotic, again, he can go L-formed and turn into other types of bacteria. So it's these guys change shapes and forms all the time. But just the way that they do things is very consistent, okay? So bacteria are always in the lower vagina and help with the vaginal biome, okay? So you definitely have a biome in your vagina. We'll talk about that in a second. But what happens is some of those guys can escape, just like the biome in our gut. And when they get out of the vagina or out of our gut, that's when they cause us problems. And problems like endometriosis happen when these guys migrate into the uterine area. So just like autism, they use TLR4 to gain entry to and hijack the metabolism of stem cells. So in a disease like autism, you're looking at more white blood cell hijack. So your blood and myeloid stem cells get hijacked in bone. This is more of a mesenchymic stem cell hijack, so it's directly getting to the stem cells that would help you build your uterus and rebuild your uterus and sort of build eggs and all that kind of stuff. So it's getting in the middle of those guys, jumping them through the same mechanism it would do with a bone stem cell through TLR4 and hijacking them. So that's kind of the pathology of all disease, honestly, is this bacterial hijack. So let's talk about real quick the vaginal biome. The microbiome is a community of bacteria and microbes living in you and on you, including many good bacteria, which play an important role in protecting your health. I don't know if there's really good bacteria. I mean, really, it would be better if our immune system was strong enough where we didn't need any bacteria. I think your body can pretty well do its thing on its own without help from a bunch of bacteria. God is a perfect engineer. He probably engineered you where you can run without a lot of other life living on you or in you. But anyway, this is a situation that we're in right now. I don't know that there's good bacteria. So I would, there's bacteria that kind of live off of us that might help us fight other bacteria. I don't know if that's good or not. But me, I want to figure out how to get rid of these guys. I don't think these guys are good for us at all. So if they're good, so be it. I would rather figure out a way to live without them. Studies have shown that there is a bidirectional relationship between your microbiome and the progression of endometriosis. True. Endometriosis can cause disruption in your microbiome, but also that a disruption in your microbiome can contribute to endometriosis. Well, that's what a circular statement that is. The microbiomes of women with endometriosis have lower levels of protective lactobacillus species and higher levels of bacterial vaginosis associated with bacteria. So again, what is the cause of endometriosis? It could be a lot of different things, but it's looking like, again, a time when your immune system is low, and that's the way all these things happen. So it might be after a surgery, it might be when you're taking a bunch of antibiotics, it could be when you got sick, it could be a lot of different things. But the microbiome in the vagina changes where it gets disbalanced, probably with E. coli and too little lactobacillus. And it does look like lactobacillus helps in the vaginal biome quite a bit, so I might amend my good bacteria statement there. But again, lactobacillus is an important, now, with our current state of our immune system, is an important thing that you need in your vagina that does protect from these out of control other bacteria, all right? So, but again, if it gets dysregulated a little bit, E. coli can bloom, they go up the basal uterine channel and can form endometriosis. The endometrial microbiome of women with endometriosis is more diverse than healthy women. And that is always the case. The sicker you are, the more diverse your biome is. And I don't know why there's studies out there that say the exact opposite, but that's bullshit. I would look into those studies quite heavily. Because again, your gut biome and your vaginal biome is a makeup system, and it's trying to defend you. It's trying to defend you against bacterial invasion. It's also trying to kind of give you everything that you need that you're not getting from your diet, okay? And the vaginal biome is going to be tied to the, your gut microbiome. There's no question about that. So if you have a dysregulated gut biome, you're probably going to have a dysregulated vaginal biome, and you're just going to be dysregulated because that's an immune thing, if that makes sense. So the stronger our immune system is, the less junk we need to help us, and it's easier to manage, right? If we've got less junk going on, it's just sort of logic. All right, so is endometriosis cancer? All right, so all you guys out there who've had these arguments with your doctors or whatever, it is 1,000% cancer, and there's markers. The biggest marker for cancer is LDHA, and that's the lactic acid dehydrogenase enzyme, and it is always active in cancer, and it is certainly active in endometriosis. There are other tells about endometriosis, so I won't read you this, but it just the HIF1A, which you can see there, PDK1, LDHA. These are cancer markers, okay? So these are absolutely markers that if you have cancer, these guys are going to pop hot, and it's an easy way to measure cancer. Same thing in endometriosis. So again, this is inarguable proof that this works just like cancer. And basically the translation there, so endometriosis is characterized by the same metabolic changes as cancer, all right? So cancer is endometriosis, and endometriosis is cancer. There's no arguing that data. So if you would like to take this to your gyno and shove it right down his face hole, if he argues with you, then feel free to do it. If you want to have me talk to him, feel free to do it. I'm always happy to do that, by the way, too. If you have a doctor, let's set it up beforehand. Don't cold call me. But if you have a doctor who's arguing with you about any of this stuff that we presented at Chip Talks, that's what I'm here for, guys. So we need to retrain the medical community. Those guys don't know what they're doing. They've been taught about how to work on your vehicle in a certain way, and it's very limited. It's a very limited box, and then they're also siloed, right? So your gynecologist doesn't know about your heart, and your heart guy doesn't know about what the gynecologist knows about, and that's a bad situation. Okay, so sorry, got a little preachy there. Let's get into how these bacteria actually hijack things and what happens under this bacterial hijack. It's fascinating. It's going to take, honestly, years to get this all figured out. But in theory, we've got it pretty well figured out. But this all needs to be, lab work and all that kind of stuff to really prove this out. But it's looking like both in autism and in endometriosis, the way that these stem cells get hijacked is through a receptor called TLR4. And in a similar way that we know that kind of COVID gets in us through ACE2, the ACE2 neuroreceptor, well, TLR4 in our stem cells is how these bacteria get in. And they use this stuff called LPS, which is kind of a stuff that'll float around in your blood and in your lymphatic system. And that's what they release LPS, and LPS goes out and finds new stem cells, invades them, and proliferates the disease. So it's the way that these guys move around, but it's also the way that they have to enter a cell and hijack it, in order to set up their fort, right? So, how do they set up a fort? Well, this is the way. So detection of microbial components such as lipopolysaccharide by toll-like receptor 4, TLR4, on macrophages induces a robust pro-inflammatory response that is dependent on metabolic programming. Translation. When you hit TLR4, that cell, that macrophage, that white blood cell, is going to start all of this inflammatory machinery, okay? And inflammatory machinery is how cancer grows, is how these disease states go, and they all have pro-inflammatory machinery, okay? And look at robust pro-inflammatory response that is dependent on metabolic programming. So again, if I've got your stem cells hijacked, I know exactly, I've already got them reprogrammed, okay? So they're reprogrammed so they won't kill me, and that's what happens. These innate metabolic changes have been compared to aerobic glycolysis. That's cancer. Warburg effect, that's the metabolic change that happens in cancer, aerobic glycolysis in tumor cells. However, the mechanisms by which TLR4 activation leads to mitochondrial and glycolytic reprogramming are unknown. No, they're not. I know what they are. Here we show that TLR4 activation induces a signaling cascade recruiting TRAF6 and TBK1, while TBK1 phosphorylates STAT3 on S727. So I won't continue on, but the important thing is the phosphorylation of STAT3 on S727. Yeah, it's pretty complicated, sounds like, but we'll break her down. So these guys get in through TLR4. What do? They induce a change in STAT3, okay? So our study identifies non-canonical STAT3 activation as a crucial signaling intermediary for TLR4-induced glycolysis, macrophage metabolic reprogramming, and inflammation. So they get in through TLR4, and then they initiate STAT3 through phosphorylation. It's kind of complicated, but it's really not. It's easy to understand. All right, so what's STAT3 and the bacterial hijack? Well, what does STAT3 have to do with anything? Yes, okay, so this study has more to do with, well, if STAT3 is really active, like in the bacterial hijack back here, so if the bacteria have got it hijacked and they've got the pedal to the metal on STAT3 because they've changed that metabolic reprogramming of that cell, and that cell, they want to stay in a certain state, so they've got to step on the gas on STAT3. This study is about a small molecule, curcumin, turmeric, that will inhibit STAT3, okay? So it will stop that gas pedal from being pushed down. And look what happens. Our findings indicate that this small molecule, that's curcumin, turmeric, exhibits potent inhibitory activity to STAT3. So it inhibits it, it takes the foot off the gas, and has potential for targeting multiple myeloma, glioblastoma, liver cancer, and colorectal cancers expressing constitutive STAT3 signaling, which endometriosis does as well. Cool, huh? Yeah. Okay, so what happens in this bacterial hijack in the endocannabinoid system? This is really cool. And again, the endocannabinoid system is your master regulatory system. So if I'm going to get you, if I'm bacteria and I'm going to set up my little fort, well, at least locally, I got to have a way to control your endocannabinoid system or it's going to find a way to kill me. And so it turns out that, guess what? LPS is a bad thing to our endocannabinoid system. So upon LPS stimulation, CB2 transcripts were decreased 46 and 42% at 4 hours and 24 hours respectively when compared to unstimulated populations. Thus, these results suggest that LPS stimulation of murine mouse B cells causes a decrease in CB2 mRNA expression in contrast to the increase observed following human B cell stimulation through CD40. So this is interesting. LPS does certain things to mice, and it does a little bit different things to us, but it definitely jacks with CB2, okay? And again, downregulation of cannabinoid 2 receptor messenger RNA. So the worst thing that can happen is our messenger RNA for CB2 can get downregulated. In a bacterial infection, you've got to have CB2. CB2 is what controls your immune response at a really, really high level. So what study 1 is saying is, well, you got about half as many of them in bacterial invasion number 1. So apparently a bacterial strategy is to cut down not on the amount of sort of ligands for CB2, but the genetic expression of CB2, which is amazing and pretty hardcore, but there's a reason for that. This second study really points to something called, it's phosphorylation. And again, how these guys work is sort of they get in the middle of phosphorylation. And in particular, PLA2 is a big one. And so again, LPS also affects phospholipase A2, PLA2. And PLA2 is sort of how you rebuild anandamide and 2-AG. So again, it's looking like these bacteria get in the middle of our genetic expression for our endocannabinoid system and certainly in the immune side. And then they also get in the middle of how we're able to sort of rebuild the ligands that we need to signal into that mess. And they absolutely, no question, affect the endocannabinoid system. But the way that they do it is through phospholipase, which is just high level. It's about as high level as you can get inside of you. But it makes sense, and it makes sense that, kind of that's part of the hijack. Okay, so let's talk about circadian rhythms, because again, these little bacteria are smart and they use your forces against you. This is in mice, but I think this is a really cool study. I haven't been really looking for this study. I knew it would appear, when it sort of needed to. But this does a really good job, and this is in mice, so you have to kind of flip this time around if it's in us. Mice are nocturnal, so they're, sleep during the day and are active at night. I think this is geared to their active phase, though. So the kind of white side of the graphic over there on the right is day, and the dark side is night. Maybe you'd have to look at the study, but anyway, you can see the big thing that I want you to see here is that you have these circadian expressions of all of your organs. Okay, even your fat goes through circadian expressions. Your brainstem goes through circadian expressions. Your hypothalamus certainly does. Your liver, your kidneys, your lungs, and your brown fat, your heart, are the biggest, let's say, oscillators or resonators to circadian rhythm. So in mice, we found 43% of all protein-coding genes showed circadian rhythms in transcription somewhere in the body, largely in an organ-specific manner. So again, you do this dance every day of function. And organs light up at certain times and close down at certain times. Light up at certain times and close down at certain times. And that's circadian driven. In most organs, we notice the expression of many oscillating genes peak during transcriptional rush hours preceding dawn and dusk. So you got a lot of stuff going on right kind of when you're falling asleep, and a lot of stuff going on right when you wake up. System level analysis reveals intricate, rhythmic orchestrations of gene pathways throughout the body. 43% of your genes are associated with circadian rhythm, okay? We also found oscillations in the expression of more than 1,000 known and novel non-coding RNAs, stuff they're trying to give us for COVID, supporting their potential role in mediating clock function. Non-coding RNAs conserved between mouse and human showed rhythmic expressions in similar proportions as protein-coding genes. So again, even your small little mRNA expressions, your little guys are going in this rhythm that we have every day, which is super important to understand. The sun. Importantly, we also found that the majority of best-selling drugs in World Health Organization essential medicines directly target the products of rhythmic genes. Many of these drugs have short half-lives and may benefit from time dosage. In sum, this study highlights critical, systematic, and surprising roles of the mammalian circadian clock and provides a blueprint for advancement in chronotherapy. If I give you a pill at a certain time, and it's for your liver, and it's, noon, your liver's asleep. It ain't going to work, okay? That's what this is saying. But it's important to know this, but it's super important that if you're a bug, you need to know this, okay? And you also need to know how these circadian rhythms affect stem cells, all right? Because that's your target. You're going after that TLR4 in that stem cell. And if you're endometriosis, you're doing it in the lining of the uterus. If you're doing it as autism, you're doing a white blood cell, but it's all the same stuff. Bone. So, about this picture, several age-related signaling pathways have been linked to the circadian clock. What? It has to do with aging, too? Again, why do we age? God is a perfect engineer. Everything in your body wants to rebuild. You should be doing this, not this. We age because of this bacterial hijack. We all have it. You may have it worse. You may have endometriosis or autism or cancer, but we all have this. We all have this. Several, look at these. These include nutrient sensing pathways. So if you look at these guys that are associated with aging, they're all associated with cancer. They're all associated with disease. All these genes are associated with the same poop, boys and girls. mTOR, SIRT1, AMPK, okay? HIF1, all associated with the same stuff. All right, lastly, on circadian rhythms, and why I'm sort of bringing this up and why this is so important to understand, is that LPS, the stuff coming from the E. coli, the way it's getting around and infecting you, knocks down your circadian clock. And if you don't have your circadian clock, you kind of lose function of 43% of your genes. Or was it 42? 43. Yeah. Okay, so you don't want that if you're a mouse. You don't want that if you're a human. So the clinical symptoms of, and this is a rheumatoid arthritis, but again, it's the same thing. They just haven't done a study on PER2 and endometriosis yet. So this is all the same thing. RA is just a different bacterial hijack, a little bit different the way it works in cells, as endometriosis, as cancer, as autism, as muscular dystrophy, as muscular sclerosis, as on and on and on. Boy, have you been lied to. Wow. The clinical symptoms of rheumatoid arthritis present with circadian variation, with joint stiffness and pain more prominent in the early morning because it's circadian. That's why you hurt in the morning. If you have endometriosis, you probably think you're going through menopause every day because you get hot every night, you sweat every night, because again, that's part of LPS. It's pyrogenic, it creates fever, it creates heat, okay? The mammalian clock genes, which include circadian locomotor output cycles, kaput, brain and muscle are not like proteins. Sorry, didn't really need to read you that. Those are the clock genes. We'll just go to the bottom. Therefore, PER2 may contribute to the pathogenesis of RA, and it does. So again, if I can knock down PER2, I sort of dysregulate a bunch of genes associated with your immune response, and that's a pretty smart thing for me to do if I'm a bacteria, okay? Does this happen in cancer? Loss of co-repressor PR2 under hypoxia upregulates OCT1. OCT1 is a cancer identifying gene, mediated EMT gene expression enhances tumor malignancy. So again, if PER2 is gone, your tumor is going to be way more malignant. PER2 is associated with clock, with circadian rhythm. How do I mess this up? Sugar. You can look it up yourself. PER2 sugar, glucose. The circadian clock gene PER2 has been suggested to be a tumor suppressor, except unless you eat a lot of sugar, and then it's not going to be. We found that loss of PER2 enhanced invasion and activated expressions of epithelial, mesenchymal, transition, EMT genes, including twist, slug, and snail. Okay? You don't want to lose PER2 because these guys heat up. You lose control of 43% of your genes if you lose clock. This finding was corroborated by clinical observations that PER2 downregulation was associated with poor prognosis in breast cancer patients. In all cancer patients, by the way, it's just that was what they studied. Hypoxia, and hypoxia is associated with cancer. That's what HIF1A has to do. It's your hypoxia gene. Hypoxia condition commonly observed in tumors caused PER2 degradation and disrupted the PER2 repressor complex, leading to activation of EMT gene expression. This result was further supported by clinical data showing a significant negative correlation between hypoxia and PER2. Thus, our findings clearly demonstrate the tumor suppression function of PER2 and elicited a pathway by which hypoxia promotes EMT via degradation of PER2. So again, you don't want to lose PER2. If you lose PER2, your cancer will become more malignant. You're more susceptible to cancer. PER2 is associated with 43% of your genes and helps you regulate everything. So if you lose that, you lose control over all of this immune stuff, okay? And it doesn't matter really how much THC you take or, cannabinoids or supplements or, again, if you're eating a lot of sugar, you're affecting PER2. Okay, endometriosis, what is it? So bacterial hijack occurs at opportunistic times. Again, it could be any time that your immune system is low. This could start to happen, this progression of sort of bacteria. When our immune system is low, we're an opportunistic host. It doesn't really matter where these bacteria invade us. They're going to try. And they're always going to try, and they're everywhere. I just ate a jillion bacteria because they're all over the place. So again, it's about your immune system and your ability to fight this off and then kill these guys when it happens. And you've got so many ways to do this. And we shut them all off with our stupid behavior and our stupid diet that's been forced down our throats by them, right? So we can change all that, and you have great power over all of this in your behavior and diet, okay? So it's associated with E. coli and other LPS producing bacteria. So again, if a bacteria can get inside you and produce LPS, it can kind of set up this whole situation. The release of LPS at opportune times allows bacteria to proliferate. So the bacteria understand your circadian rhythms, and they're going to go when stuff is down. They're going to use LPS to proliferate. I can show you this with the thermal imaging camera, which is really cool. The bacteria hijack, in this case, in endometriosis, they hijack the mesenchymal stem cells using LPS via TLR4. Okay, LPS activates STAT3, which activates the hijack. That changes the metabolic programming of the cell. There's a little bit more to it than that, but that's the main thing that changes the metabolic programming of the cell. STAT3 can be inhibited by curcumin. There's probably other things too, but again, curcumin is, works. Curcumin is also rumored to cause oxidative stress and will, but it's kind of when you're in this bacterial hijack and you throw a bunch of curcumin on stuff, you've got a bunch of cells that are trying to become more efficient and now run on fat, and they're being stimulated by the curcumin. And when they can't, because of the pathology of the disease is forcing them back, that causes oxidative stress, a lot of oxidative stress. So this is why curcumin does cause oxidative stress at certain times. Is if you're the sicker that you are and the more hijacked you are, kind of the more oxidative stress this is going to cause, because it's trying to get you to flip past that hijack. LPS also affects PER2, which affects circadian rhythm. And again, sugar affects PER2. All right, so solutions and kind of the why. Bacterial infections are tightly tied to circadian rhythms, and we'll use these against you. There's no question about that. It is important to be in line with our circadian systems in order to help our bodies fight cancer or endometriosis. So what does that mean, be in line with our circadian rhythms? You need to understand something like, if you're sort of get up at a normal time, go to bed at a normal time, that's sort of how you set in a big way your circadian rhythm. If you're a shift worker, you're going to immediately have additional stresses that we need to talk about, or we'll do a show about, or something, or kind of what happens, but your circadian will get off. The most disruptive thing that you do to yourself every single day is eat. And when you eat, you disrupt your circadian rhythm, and you disrupt it for 5 hours, okay? So you stop doing whatever you were supposed to be doing in your rhythms, and you have to focus in on what you ate, and it takes you 5 hours to do that. So eating is super duper costly to all of this, your immune response, how you fight disease, all of it. And it seems kind of counterintuitive to think, the more we eat, the more power we'll have to fight stuff off. No, it doesn't really work that way. You're costing yourself when you eat. Now, we all know we have to eat certain nutrients, and we need the nutrients to be able to fight the disease, right? So that is a very careful balance between intermittent fasting and intentional eating. But those two things are the most powerful thing that you can do to help yourself fight anything, to keep your immune system strong, okay? So will supplements, and again, intentional eating, what do I mean? Well, you really just need, it's 5 things, I guess. So you need 5 things. So you need fats in proper ratio. What are those? Saturated, monounsaturated, polyunsaturated. Polyunsaturated are essential, omega-3 and omega-6. You need to eat those in proper ratio and proper balance. But those you don't have to eat every day. Your body will store those, again, and use those very effectively. So you're really good at storing and hanging on to advantageous fats as long as you're eating them in the right ratio. That's super important. The thing that most of us are super deficient in, and we don't even realize it, is amino acids. And again, I'm telling everybody we should take 9 essential amino acids before every meal. Now, we have a supplement, True Medics just has this up, called Essentials, that has all the fats and aminos that you need already taken into account, and also taken into account all the amino acids that the bacterial hijack is taking from you, because that's what it does. It sucks up resources, and in particular amino acids. So again, it basically eats the aminos that you need to be able to build the stuff like defensins to kill it. It's pretty smart. But again, giving yourself amino acids, it's kind of a throw gas on the fire strategy, but it works, and it will turn things around. Again, you're giving them kind of what they want to eat, but the bacteria can only go so far. Otherwise, they're going to kill you. So you can kind of use that against them and use their immune response and their behavior against the little critters. All right, so supplementing with these things, this is what they are and kind of what they do. So berberine directly blocks TLR4 and theoretically will block the progression and procession of the infection. So if you have endometriosis, berberine should be on your supplement list. And by the way, these things are kind of consistent to all these bacterial loops. So we will have a supplement here called Breaker or something very, very soon. Probably next week, as soon as next week. So if you can hold out a week, then we'll have something. But berberine blocks TLR4, super important in autism, super important in looks like the pathology of this disease to block that guy. Curcumin, again, directly inhibits STAT3, and that's part of the pathology, so that looks to be a good thing to do. So we'll have some curcumin in there, or turmeric. Resveratrol is an AMPK effector, and it's going to be in our stuff, and we're going to suggest that you take this stuff when you're in a fasted state, because resveratrol, if you're in a fed state and you take a bunch of resveratrol, it's going to cause oxidative stress, and curcumin will do the same thing. So you need to be in a fasted state, and we need to hit that AMPK button as hard as we can, which you're doing by being fasted, but we're going to push it in 100 different ways, because AMPK pushes P53. P53 kills cancer. P53 will kill endometriosis. And then rosemary extract, which is looking to be a loop breaker. It's looking to be almost as powerful of a thing as things like THC or antiparasitics or the other big things that we'll use as big loop breakers. So again, if you kind of go through this and you're intermittent fasting, you begin to intentionally eat, you're supplementing with these things, and if you're still having major symptoms, then we're going to have to go to kind of our big loop breakers. And these things are, kind of what we have to do in cancer, right? And these things all work, in cancer. So in our major effectors, our THC. THC does some really cool things in this whole system that help you break the loop. CBDs also help in a kind of a one-to-one situation is best. Based on, FICO is obviously really, really good for cancer, but we can't forget the other side, because CB2 and actions of CB2, and that's kind of cannabidiol helps all of that. It doesn't really hit CB2, but it helps all of that, will help everything. So cannabidiol is a big helper here too, along with THC. Disinfectants, and this is kind of a new one. Chlorine dioxide has been talked a lot about with autism. Again, you can read the controversy about all that, but that works in certain cases, and it can be safe as long as you do it with intolerance. And that would be the stuff that you use to disinfect water. Okay, so what is that stuff here? Hold on just a second. Hold on. I'll show it to you. We'll do it on the big screen. I'll talk about this in a second. I'll just talk about the other ones. So there's frequency treatments, and again, we're finding that it's really interesting. So 222 nanometers of light will kill anything inside of you, okay? Anything, any bug at all. The problem is I can't get it through your skin. Your skin will absorb it and use it as energy, but I can't get it to penetrate your skin. What I can do is mimic that light in frequency. And if we mimic that light in frequency, now we can get into your bone. So we can get right into where these little guys live and disinfect them out of there. And that's looking to be a viable treatment. We'll see. We're playing around with that now. And then antiparasitics. So if you know someone who has cancer, or a lot of people have recovered using fenbendazole, mebendazole, ivermectin. There's a lot of them, and again, it kind of depends on what the bacterial loop is and what the bacteria associated with that loop are. But antiparasitics are a big, new effector. And then chemo, and chemo's been around forever. Okay, so that's kind of all I got. But what I do want to show you guys is this. So, you can get these guys at Walmart, portable aqua. And then if you can, let's see if we can get in on the ingredients there. So you see that sodium chlorite at 6.4%. And I weighed out these tablets. So if you're getting the same thing, you can don't take 10 of these. You could safely take 10 of them. Don't do that. Cindy and I took 5 of them. You will get an antibacterial effect if you do that. So anyway, those are loop breakers as well. So lots of things out there. So anyway, if you have endometriosis or are suffering from endometriosis, there's lots of hope. This is something that can be turned around. It is a recoverable disease, just like cancer, just like all these bacterial loops appear to be. So, and obviously, if you guys have any questions or anything like that, leave them in the thread. We're always here. This is what we do. Love you guys.